What's going on, guys? So today I wanted to take some time and talk about a phenomenon in movies that has been around for a while, but especially in the last couple of years has really risen to prominence, and that's the idea of the two-part movie. So with the idea of a two-part movie, there's a lot to go into, but really the conversation I'm interested in having is whether or not the decision to do a two-part movie is purely financially driven, if there's a degree of artistic integrity at play, or ideally if those two things are kind of meeting somewhere in the middle. So an example of an early two-part movie is Tarantino's Kill Bill. Kill Bill is something that Tarantino wanted to do in just one movie, but for a lot of reasons he had to cut it in half, and if you ask him about it, he will tell you that he considers it to just be one movie. Where I think the idea got really popular was in 2010 to 2011, when Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows split its last movie into two. Following this, the idea was kind of beaten into the ground with other YA novels such as Twilight, Hunger Games, and Divergent. So this is kind of tricky to talk about, right? Because I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so the fact that there are 8 Harry Potter movies and not 7 is not something that I'm going to complain about. And I think, the fact that Harry Potter is nothing short of a worldwide phenomenon, I don't think anybody was complaining about the idea. But then you've got franchises like Twilight and Hunger Games and Divergent, and I'm personally not a big fan of those, so whether or not the idea of making the last movie in those installments into 2 parts is cynical or not really for me to say. I'll leave that for the fans of those franchises. Also, I haven't really seen those movies, so again, hard to say. Then after that, you'd get Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, which is a real head scratcher for a lot of people because The Hobbit's not a long book, and they made that into 3 movies. So it's hard to look at that and not think that it was done pretty cynically and out of a desire to just milk it for as much money as they could. But then you got something like Stephen King's It, which is over 1,000 pages, and they made that into 2 movies. And so that's something where I would look at that and say, yeah, you need at least 2 movies minimum to tell that story. So up until this point, these are all just kind of outliers, not really indicative of any Hollywood trends. But then in 2018, we got Avengers: Infinity War. And this movie ends on a huge cliffhanger. And cliffhanger is going to be the word of the day here, folks, so keep that in mind. Up until this point for Marvel movies, outside of a cameo at the end, these movies were all kind of a closed loop. There's stakes and implications that would later carry over into other movies, but for the most part, these stories kind of have a beginning, middle, and an end. Up until Infinity War. That was the first one that really took a risk, and one that I think paid off big time, because as we know, Endgame made $3 billion. So I think the decision to have that be a 2-part story was really born out of a desire to do that story correctly. So that's a good example of a movie 2-parter. Then after Endgame in 2019, we didn't see a lot of anything in theaters. But in the last couple of years, the concept of a 2-parter has really kind of gotten a lot more popular. This year alone, we've got Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. We've got Part 2 of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. We got Across the Spider-Verse, which is not, it doesn't have Part 1 in the title, but it's very much one half of a complete story. And then we got Fast X, which is supposed to be Part 1 of a 3-part story, so that's cool, I guess. So the big thing that these movies seem to have in common, and granted I haven't seen Mission Impossible or Dune yet at the time of this recording, but Across the Spider-Verse ends in a huge cliffhanger. Dune ends in a cliffhanger, but in a little bit more of a subtle way. It's not as dramatic as the cliffhanger at the end of Infinity War, if we're going to compare the two. For me, that seems to be the thing that warrants doing this, is the cliffhanger and the art of having a great cliffhanger. And something that I find in a lot of our media today is that people just don't have a huge attention span anymore. I feel in a lot of cases, asking for somebody's 2 hours just to watch one movie is asking a lot. God forbid you don't wrap up the whole movie with a nice little bow by the end of that 2 hours. So there's just this idea of people, I feel people are impatient and they want things to be wrapped up for the most part. Outside of the Marvel universe, which is an anomaly and really has no other basis for comparison, that's something that's just never going to end. So looking for any level of finality in that, you got to take it where you can get it, and I feel in Infinity War Endgame is really where they really did it. I feel this concept of asking an audience to carry over a level of investment for a long period of time and look forward to the next chapter, and to have trust in the filmmakers and to just kind of trust them to, you know, be like, this is going to be worth it. You know, you're going to be glad that there's 2 of these, not just 1. So I guess all this is to say that, you know, I'm really kind of here for this era of like the 2-part movie, you know, where it's not quite a sequel, you know, it's a direct continuation. You know, ideally after a cliffhanger, the next installment should pick up right where you left off. And I think that's just fun, you know, it's kind of a throwback to like the more serialized, you know, episodic nature of things, you know, with TV where, you know, this still happens, but lots of TV always ends in a cliffhanger, you know, especially from season to season, you know, and it's like that hook that carries you and keeps you interested, keeps you coming back. You know, it's got to be very enticing. And for the most part, I feel like the cliffhanger movies, the big action blockbuster cliffhanger movies that I've seen recently, notably Across the Spider-Verse, as well as Dune, you know, you can look at these examples and think, you know, this is, for me anyway, I kind of like what they're doing here. You know, let them cook, you know, as they say. You know, it's very unlikely that something like Dune was not going to get a sequel, but I still feel like there's something to be said for having the balls to really, you know, put a movie out and say, this is just, you know, a taste. You know, there's more to come. Especially in this era where, like, I feel like so many things are announced and, like, none of them come to fruition. It just, you know, I appreciate when we can put something out and let it exist and generate hype and cause discussions amongst people and fans, and they just discuss this thing, you know, eagerly awaiting the next installment. That's the kind of thing I live for, you know, and I would be willing to bet a lot of money that when Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 comes out here in a couple weeks, that's going to end in a really cool cliffhanger, and you're going to be like, oh, I understand why they're doing another one. So anyway, guys, that's just my thoughts on all this. What do you guys think about this phenomenon? Do you think it's here to stay? Is this just something we're, you know, kind of in the middle of right now but doesn't have any legs? Do you like movies that tell a complete story, or do you like it when, you know, they kind of have room to stretch their legs and really flesh things out? This has all just been my opinion, so I'd love to hear yours. Sound off in the comments, let me know what you think. Like and subscribe if you're into that sort of thing, and remember to take care and watch more movies.